You won't last a week. The mockery was hurled in her face. They despised her, a desk officer thrown into the lion's den. But she didn't even flinch. And when her brilliant strategy exposed the traitor and saved everyone, the entire unit was silenced. If you have ever been underestimated and had to prove your own worth, subscribe to the channel to find strength with us. May God always be with you. A crisp autumn wind swept down from the snow-dusted peak of Pikes Peak, rattling the windows of Peterson Space Force Base in Colorado Springs. The thin mountain air carried the scent of pine and impending winter, a stark contrast to the sterile, pressurized atmosphere inside the command center of Joint Task Force Ares. Here, there was no weather, only the suffocating tension of failure. The room was a cavern of muted blues and blacks, dominated by a massive holographic globe that hung in the center, spinning silently. It was a spiderweb of complex satellite orbits, but one critical sector over East Africa pulsed with an ominous, angry red. This was the battleground for Operation Shadowfall. For 3 agonizing months, Task Force Ares had been hunting Cerberus, an elusive cyber-terrorist group systematically blinding their communication satellites. Every ground raid, every counter-hack had hit nothing but shadows and decoys. The news of General Marcus Thorne's massive stroke had landed like a precision-guided bomb. He was the soul of Ares, a legendary commander who had built the unit from the ground up. In his absence, a vacuum had formed, and everyone assumed Captain Dominic "Dom" Gallo would fill it. Gallo stood near the holotable now, a man carved from battlefield granite. At 40, his past as a Green Beret was evident in his solid build, a jawline that seemed permanently clenched and sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing and forgave less. He wore his olive-drab duty uniform with the ease of a second skin, his posture radiating a confidence that bordered on ownership of the room. Then, the encrypted order flashed down from the Pentagon. The temporary replacement was not Gallo. It was a name no one in the room recognized. Major Evelyn Reed, U.S. Space Force, seconded from the Defense Intelligence Agency. When the door hissed open, a collective silence fell. She was 30 years old, with striking, intelligent beauty. Her pale skin contrasted sharply with her raven-black hair, pulled back into a severe, immaculate bun that exposed a high forehead and the clean line of her jaw. Her olive-drab uniform was perfectly tailored to her slender frame, bearing the insignia of the Space Force and the rank of a major. She carried no weapon, only a standard-issue datapad. Her most arresting feature was her eyes, a placid deep green that held the stillness of a forest lake, revealing nothing of the analytical storm that lay beneath. She was not a battle-hardened warrior. She was a living weapon of a different kind. "Major Reed," Gallo's voice broke the silence, the word major laced with a deliberate, patronizing emphasis. "Welcome to the circus. Hope you brought popcorn." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the operators. From a nearby console, Technical Sergeant Miller piped up, his voice carrying easily. Miller was a wiry man in his late 20s, a brilliant communications specialist whose genius was matched only by his arrogance. A perpetual smirk seemed fixed on his thin lips. "Probably thinks cyber warfare is like playing StarCraft at the Pentagon," he muttered to his neighbor. Eve's expression didn't flicker. She ignored Miller completely, her green eyes sweeping over the flashing red data streams on the main screen before settling on Gallo. "Captain," she said, her voice calm, level, and cutting through the tension with the precision of a scalpel. "Brief me on the current status of Operation Shadowfall. And not the version in the official reports. I want to know why we are failing." Her authority was quiet, but absolute. The chuckles died instantly, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable silence. Later, in the sterile anonymity of her temporary quarters, Eve slid the door shut, the silence a welcome reprieve. She unzipped her duffel bag and pulled out a worn, creased photograph from a protected inner pocket. It showed her standing next to a young man with the same black hair and a wide, easy grin, his U.S. Marine Corps dress uniform immaculate. Ben, her younger brother. His unit was currently deployed in the volatile Horn of Africa, providing security for a remote diplomatic outpost. Their entire communications lifeline, for supplies, for medical evacuation, for air support, ran through the very satellite cluster Cerberus was targeting. Every time a new system glitch was reported, a cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. This mission wasn't just a professional challenge, it was a desperate personal fight. She walked to the window, staring out at the formidable silhouette of the Rocky Mountains against the fading twilight. She made a silent promise to the darkening sky and the distant peaks. She would protect the heavens above, and she would protect the brother who served below them. The first morning briefing under Major Reed's command began with a revolution. The air in the command center was already frigid, a mirror of the cold Colorado dawn breaking over the mountains. But Eve's first words dropped the temperature to absolute zero. Effective immediately, all field operations are suspended. She stood before the holographic globe, her hands clasped behind her back. Her voice was even, devoid of emotion, yet it commanded the full attention of the room. Task Force Aries will now enter a phase of passive hunting. The room erupted. Captain Gallo slammed a heavy fist on the briefing table, making the tactical displays flicker. Passive? Major, Cerberus is active. They are hitting our assets as we speak. We need to be kicking down doors, not sitting on our hands. His face was flushed with disbelief and fury, his deep voice a low growl of defiance. We have been kicking down the doors of empty rooms, Captain, Eve countered, her gaze fixed on the data streams flowing across a side monitor. She didn't raise her voice, yet it cut through his anger. Cerberus wants us to be loud. They want us to burn resources chasing ghosts across the globe. They are laying a complex trap, and we have been walking into it with our eyes wide open. From now on, we don't hunt, we cast a net. Her strategy was a complete pivot. All resources were to be funneled into satellite intelligence, SIGINT analysis, and cyber warfare. She ordered access to the digital sandboxes, deep-level simulation servers that General Thorne himself had rarely touched. These were systems capable of running predictive algorithms on a scale that could model entire geopolitical conflicts. Gallo and his loyalists protested vehemently, arguing that it was a sterile, academic approach to a real-world fight. But the orders were from the acting commander, and they were forced to comply, their resentment simmering just below the surface. The resistance began quietly. Eve tasked Sergeant Miller with performing a full, uncorrupted data scrape from a series of encrypted servers Cerberus had briefly used. It was a monumental task, requiring sifting through petabytes of junk data to find a few kilobytes of value. Hours later, Miller approached her console, a look of theatrical regret on his face. "Major, I've got bad news," he said, his smirk thinly veiled. "We ran into a cascading parity error during the deep-level extraction. The primary data string is corrupted, irrecoverable. It seems we've lost a significant portion of the archive." He thought this would stall her for days, a technical setback she couldn't possibly overcome quickly, proving her strategy's fragility. Eve didn't even turn from her screen. She simply tapped a few commands onto her keyboard. "I assume there might be technical difficulties, Sergeant." A new window opened on the main display, showing a perfectly intact progress bar, already at 75% completion. That's why I partitioned the root directory and ran a parallel ghost protocol through a secondary server from the moment you began. Your corrupted data is irrelevant. The smirk vanished from Miller's face, replaced by a pale, wide-eyed shock. He looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Across the room, Gallo, who had been watching with interest, froze. The woman didn't just play chess, she played on 3 boards at once. That night, the command center was quiet, populated only by the hum of servers and the soft glow of the monitors. Eve sat in the commander's chair, her work for the day done, but her mind still racing, seeking a connection, a deeper understanding of the man whose seat she now occupied. She used her command clearance to access General Thorne's personal archives. She wasn't looking for secrets, but for strategy, for a glimpse into his mind. She found a series of encrypted audio logs, labeled simply Reflections. The interface was old, text-based, a relic of a different era. She selected the most recent entry, dated a week before his stroke. The general's deep, gravelly voice filled the quiet of the room, tired but clear. "The nature of the battlefield has changed," Thorne's recorded voice lamented. "Some of my officers still have Cold War thinking. They see tanks and planes and soldiers on the ground. They don't see the real high ground anymore. They don't understand that the next world war might be won or lost by a handful of 20-year-olds who can write elegant code, not by who has the most missiles. The future of command requires a mind that sees the war in the wires, in the signals, in the silence between the data packets. Eve leaned forward, her eyes closed, listening intently. A profound sense of connection washed over her. She was not an outsider deposing a king. She was the fulfillment of his vision. He had seen the future, and in his words, she found the validation she needed. The path she was on was not just her own. It was the one the legendary general had been trying to forge all along. Her resolve hardened like steel. For 72 sleepless hours, the command center had become Eve's world. Fueled by black coffee and sheer force of will, she had immersed herself in the digital ocean of data, hunting for a single drop of truth. The rest of the task force moved around her with a mixture of resentment and grudging curiosity, watching the woman who had silenced their aggressive tactics in favor of what seemed like an endless, silent vigil. Finally, in the cold, pre-dawn hours of the third day, she found it. It wasn't a string of malicious code or a hidden back door. It was the opposite. It was a whisper of silence from a civilian communications satellite named Stellarix 7. A commercial bird in a geostationary orbit over the continental U.S. Its diagnostic handshake signal, a routine, hourly ping that reported its system health, had gone dead. To any other analyst, it would be logged as a minor, non-critical hardware malfunction. To Eve, whose algorithms were designed to detect aberrations and patterns, this silence was a deafening scream. Cerberus wasn't attacking it. They were inside it, pulling a blanket over its head to hide their movements. She called an emergency briefing immediately. The operators and officers filed in, their faces etched with fatigue and skepticism. Gallo stood at the back, arms crossed over his broad chest, his expression a thundercloud. Cerberus's next target is the Stellarix ground station in the Nevada desert, Eve announced, her voice cutting through the low murmur. A 3D model of the station appeared on the holographic display. They will use their access to the satellite to focus a microwave energy burst, creating a localized electromagnetic pulse. The effect will be a complete blackout of all power and communications in a 500-mile radius. Based on their patterns, the attack will occur in the next 24 hours. "That's insane!" Gallo's voice boomed, stepping forward. "Our humant is solid. All signs point to a Cerberus training camp in Yemen. You're chasing a ghost based on a dead satellite, Major. This is a diversion, and you're falling for it. I will not send my people into the middle of the desert on a hunch." The tension in the room snapped. The division between the old guard and the new commander was now a chasm. "My conclusion is not a hunch, Captain. It is a statistical certainty derived from the evidence," Eve stated coldly. "I will not obey that order," Gallo declared, his voice low and dangerous. The ultimate act of insubordination. The room held its breath. At that precise moment, a frantic shout came from the communications console. "Major!" It was Sergeant Miller, his face pale with manufactured panic. "Our primary cyber defense grid just went dark. It's a complete system crash. We're blind." It was a perfectly timed act of sabotage, meant to shatter Eve's credibility at its most fragile moment. But Eve's expression remained unreadable. A flicker of something, not surprise, but confirmation, passed through her green eyes. "Switch all monitoring to the Argus subsystem," she ordered, her voice unshaken. "I activated it as a redundant network yesterday." A junior officer, a young first lieutenant named Chen, whose loyalty had been wavering, typed frantically. A moment later, the main screen, which had gone black, flashed back to life with a completely new interface. It was sleek, efficient, and currently displaying a bright red, undeniable data stream. A river of malicious code flowing directly from a hidden server and terminating at the Stellarix ground station. Miller's sabotage was not only nullified, it was exposed for all to see. The color drained from his face as he stared at the screen, his mouth slightly agape. He had been outmaneuvered and exposed in a single command. Just as the Argus system stabilized, a high-priority flag flashed on Eve's personal console, an alert only she could see. It was a flash intelligence report from Central Command. Her blood ran cold as she read it. Her brother Ben's Marine unit had just been rerouted. Their new area of operations was a remote, isolated valley deep in the desolate expanse of the Nevada desert. Their mission? Guarding a high-value asset. And their sole communications relay for the entire operation was Stellaric 7. A wave of nausea and white-hot fury washed over her. If that EMP went off, Ben's unit would be deaf, dumb, and utterly alone, a perfect target. This was no longer an abstract war of data and satellites. This was her brother's life on the line. As she fought to keep her composure, the door to the command center opened. A communications officer, a young woman with a serious expression, walked briskly towards her, holding a secured data pad. "Major Reed," she said, her voice hushed. "An urgent message from Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. General Thorne. He's conscious." She handed the datapad to Eve. On the screen was a blurry, low-resolution video feed from a hospital room. General Thorne lay propped against pillows, looking frail and diminished, an oxygen tube clipped to his nose. But when he spoke, his voice, though weak and raspy, held the unshakable core of command that had made him a legend. "Reed's strategy," he breathed, his eyes finding the camera. "It's the only path. Trust her. That is my final order." The video ended. A profound, absolute silence fell over the command center. Gallo stared at the blank screen, his defiance finally, utterly broken. The war for command of Task Force Ares was over. General Thorne's final order hung in the air, an undeniable finality that shattered the last vestiges of rebellion. The change in the command center was instantaneous. Under the unwavering authority of Major Reed, the fractured unit fused into a single, perfect weapon. Eve's fingers flew across her console, her face illuminated by the cascading lines of code. She wasn't just defending, she was attacking. Miller's sabotage opened a back door for them, but it also opened one for us, she announced, her voice a sharp, clear command. "Lieutenant Chen, I want you to use that vulnerability. We're not just blocking their malware, we're going to isolate it, turn their own system into a digital cage." Chen, the young officer who had activated the Argus system, nodded with newfound confidence, his previous uncertainty replaced by focused determination. The cyber team moved with a synchronized purpose they hadn't possessed in months. Simultaneously, 2 Black Hawk helicopters sliced through the cold, dark air of the Nevada desert, their rotors beating a silent rhythm against the vast emptiness. Inside, Captain Gallo, stripped of his arrogance, was a model of cold, professional efficiency. The man who had challenged Eve's every move was now the flawless instrument of her strategy. His team, clad in black tactical gear, checked their weapons in the dim red light of the cabin, their trust in him now transferred completely to the woman commanding them from 1,000 miles away. The assault was a masterclass in precision. As Eve's team digitally slammed the door on Cerberus's escape routes and locked their detonation sequence, Gallo's team breached the Stellaric's ground station. There was no protracted firefight. The 4 terrorists, 2 men and 2 women, looking more like disaffected tech graduates than hardened criminals, were found in the main control room, their faces pale in the glow of their monitors, staring in disbelief as their commands failed to respond. They were so focused on their digital attack that they never saw the physical one coming. Operation Shadowfall ended not with a bang, but with the quiet click of handcuffs. The consequences came swiftly. Before the ground team had even exfiltrated, 2 stern-faced military police officers entered the Ares command center. Their target was obvious. "Technical Sergeant Miller," the senior officer stated, his voice flat. "You are under arrest." Miller's face went slack with shock, his earlier arrogance crumbling into pathetic disbelief as he was led away. Captain Gallo's fate was quieter. 2 days later, he stood before Eve's desk, his posture rigid. His actions during the raid had been exemplary, saving him from a court-martial, but his insubordination could not be ignored. "Your transfer orders, Captain," Eve said, handing him a datapad. It was a reassignment to a training command at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. A respectable post, but a definitive end to his career in special operations. For a moment, he met her gaze, and in his eyes, she saw not hatred, but a hard-earned, bitter respect. "Your strategy was sound, Major," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You saved us from ourselves." He gave a curt nod, turned, and walked away. The subsequent court-martial was swift. The logs from the Argus system provided an irrefutable timeline of Sergeant Miller's sabotage. He was found guilty of dereliction of duty in a combat zone, sabotage of military equipment, and conduct unbecoming. The sentence was 5 years of hard labor at the United States Disciplinary Barracks in Fort Leavenworth, followed by a dishonorable discharge. 2 weeks later, the promotion orders were made official. Commander Evelyn Reed stood in her new office, General Thorne's former office. The autumn sun streamed through the large window, illuminating the holographic globe that now spun with tranquil, secure orbits. The atmosphere in Task Force Ares had transformed. The whispers and skepticism had been replaced by a quiet, fierce loyalty. Her console chimed, signaling a new email with a personal encryption flag. The sender was Sergeant Benjamin Reed. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it. The text was short, filled with Marine slang. "Hey Eve, craziest thing happened. We were deep in the sticks, comms completely dead. We were sitting ducks, thought we'd bought the farm for sure. Then, like a damn miracle, the birds started squawking again. Air support came in hot just as things were getting hairy. Long story short, we're all good. Mission accomplished. Stay safe. Love, Ben." A slow, genuine smile spread across Eve's face, the first she'd allowed herself in weeks. Her brother would never know that the miracle that saved him was orchestrated from this very room, by a sister who had waged a war in the shadows for him. She looked at the globe, at the silent stars and the fragile world they watched over. She was no longer an outsider. She was a guardian. And she was finally home. In the end, Ben called his rescue a miracle. And, in a way, he was right. But what kind of miracle was it? Was it a random act of fate? A lucky break in the chaos of battle? Or was it something more? Sometimes a miracle isn't a sudden flash of light from the heavens. Sometimes a miracle is the strength, the intelligence, and the unwavering resolve that God places within a person. He gave Eve a brilliant mind and an unbreakable will, but she had to be the one to endure the sleepless nights, to face the doubt and scorn, and to use the gifts she was given to forge that miracle with her own hands. In our own daily lives, we often pray for miracles when we face our own battles. In our jobs, in our families, with our health. We look for a sign from above. But this story reminds us that God often works through us. He has given each of us unique gifts. You have a strength you may not recognize, a kindness that can change someone's day, an idea that can solve a problem. You have the power to be the answer to someone else's prayer. You can be their miracle. If this story and its message resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their own inner strength. Leave a comment below and tell us about a time you saw a quiet miracle happen in your own life. And please, subscribe to the channel to support our work and join our community for more stories that inspire. May you always find the courage to be the miracle the world needs. God bless you and all those you love.